Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I'm your host, Marshall. We are going to be joined by Achilles-Napoleon. Today, we're going to talk about the Battle of Waterloo and actually, technically, the IKS Battle of Grand Waterloo and everything that happened there, including how historians in the past 208 years have got it wrong about Achilles-Napoleon. So we're going to talk about that. And to help us with understanding the battle, we're going to be joined by an AI-generated version of Achilles-Napoleon, because, of course, the real Achilles-Napoleon has been dead for almost 2 centuries. So we had to use AI, but thanks to modern technology and the strike in Hollywood, we now have an AI-generated Achilles-Napoleon. Achilles, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you this morning, sir?
I'm fine. And of course, you can't feel anything because you're AI-generated, but that's all right.
I can pretend to. I'm a Cylon.
No, you're supposed to say I'm not a Cylon. That's what Cylons say,
Oh
right?
yeah, that's right. Well, if I were a Cylon and I said I was a Cylon, would you believe me?
Ooh, yeah, it's a tough one. Anyway, we're going to talk about the battle from yesterday. I'm going to provide a really quick kind of recap of my understanding of it, and then we're going to talk about what your strategy was
Hmm.
and why you didn't win, and who I thought should have won or did
Mhm,
win the
mhm, mhm,
battle, and why they're completely wrong about you. So let's get into it. All right. So I have here the
Yeah.
module up and open, and I'll provide all of our wonderful viewers a quick little recap of the battle because I am, of course, an expert on the Battle of Grand Waterloo. And what I can tell everybody is that the British were, oh gosh, they were somewhere oh, here it is. They were deployed in a defensive position somewhere around here like this. It was not a particularly strong defensive position. It was thin, and they had reinforcements coming in from different directions, like here, and I'll just draw that there because it won't let me draw it elsewhere. And all the way up here, they had reinforcements all the way up here, and they had to get to the front. Meanwhile, the French were deployed here in tremendous concentration. I'm just going to make a big, huge arrow because that was where they were. And then, yeah, I know it's not much to look at. I didn't do very well in art school. And then the Prussians were more or
It's okay
less
because I can't see any of it.
over here around Wavre. All right, so actually, to help people with seeing, let's do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to turn my face off on the YouTube so we're not blocking key parts of the map. And then I also have to make sure that they can hear me on YouTube. Yes, they can. And then we have to, let's see if I can't share my screen with them because it's probably being shared by another app. Oh no, I can. Here it is. Boom. There we go. It's the camera that you can't do it. Now people can see the screen.
Ah,
And away we go. Yeah, we'd like to have the YouTube views, but I guess if y'all just want to view it here in real time, that's just fine too. It's not that big a deal. I'm joking. So the Prussians have to sort themselves out over here while the French plan. Well, actually, let's talk about. I'm going to let you talk about the French plan. Why do I have you here if I'm going to do all the talking, right?
that's a
So
good point.
you should join the table. I'm just saying
I
that
should.
because
How?
then, well, tabletop simulator. You're an AI.
Uh,
Figure it out. You know more stuff than I do. That's why they use you to generate news articles and everything else. And
I'm programmed to lose large battles. I'm not programmed to go into tabletop simulator.
So,
Uh, okay, so
so
what's the can you direct me as to how to
I,
get into it? Where are
yeah,
you?
it's just IKS whatever, and
Ah, gotcha. Yeah,
IKS. So yeah. All
that'll
right.
work.
So in general, my opening critique is that the British have a very thin line. They are widely dispersed. In fact, the big thing that really has me wondering what's going on is why the British headquarters is so far in the rear. Like, Wellington is bringing up the tail end of the British Army. He is nowhere near the front or in a position to command it himself. However, he does have capable subordinates. But Wellington is taking his sweet time to get here, while the French, of course, have a pretty good strategy, I feel. And of course, the Prussians have their problems as well. And just briefly on the Prussian problems before we turn to Achilles-Napoleon, is the Prussians have lost some of their key commanders, no-shows mostly. And as I understand it, so they're a little short-handed and they're having to switch up and improvise on the morning of. And then they believe they are facing a French force that is about twice the size of the force that is actually present. So the Prussian plan is really to take this ground here that I'm circling in red. Their plan is to take that ground and blow the bridges here that cross this water feature here so that the French cannot attack this way, because this is what they think. They think the French are going to attack this way, which is a sensible conclusion. I think the Prussians, even though they're completely 180 degrees incorrect, I think it's a reasonable assumption, because think about it, right? If you want to win the Battle of Waterloo, why not go around to the right, hit the Prussians where they are weak, and then push on through to Brussels from here while everybody else is moving this way? You know, it just makes sense. Basically, you go around them. Now, of course, that doesn't defeat the army, but then you cut everybody off here in the north. You take Brussels. So it makes sense. Why not maybe crush the Prussians here or go around the bulk of them and then, of course, get your way over to Brussels? Why not do that? But anyway, let's let Achilles-Napoleon do the talking for himself. Achilles, what was your plan?
All right. We were initially well, I was given a choice of I had to place at least one corps on the Wavre map chasing the Prussians, at least one corps on the Waterloo map chasing the British, and at least a division on the Hall map.
Mm-hmm.
So in the event, what I determined which map I was going to fight on early on. I was going to fight on the Waterloo map because it is Grand Waterloo. So what would be the point if I fought on the? It wasn't Grand Hall.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I said, yeah, let's do it on the Waterloo map, and I think it would be more. I thought it would be more interesting for people.
Go ahead. Go
And
ahead and draw. By the way, whatever
ah,
you got.
all right,
Talking about what would be more interesting.
yeah. Sorry
AIs
about that.
sometimes AIs just get things terribly wrong. But
So
anyway.
the on the Vavra map, I placed only a single core, and quite honestly, you know where he was. I don't.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to communicate with him, uh, so I don't actually know where he was located. He was
Hmm.
probably somewhere around there.
That's pretty
Anyway,
close. Yep.
that would have been my guess if I was going to do it myself. So yeah, it makes sense. Um, on the Hall map, I put only a single division of cavalry, and I have no idea where he was either. So we'll just put a mark up
Hmm.
there. Okay, so I wasn't allowed to really communicate with either of those wings. the main plan was to defeat the British force, and I had originally, well, I had two plans. Let me put it this way: I had two plans. There was the one that I worked out early on, which was Plan A, and I thought I call it the safe plan. And if I had used it, uh, we would probably be having a different conversation today, given how everything ended up.
And it's crazy
Um,
because historians never talk about this other plan. Like
that's
very
right. They
few,
never talk about the safe plan.
like it gets like only a couple paragraphs in like one or two books in the past 208 years. But continue. Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's right. Yes, the safe plan would have had us going. Would have had the main attack going on the left instead of the right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reason I call it the safe plan is, first of all, it would have put us much further away from where the Prussians come onto the field, so that the Prussian intervention would have been, pretty minimal in the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the details of the plan would have been essentially the same as far as what I was throwing into it. It would have been two full corps plus a cavalry corps in that punch,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have been targeting. Let's see. Let's find the locations on the map. Sure, I should tell you that the initial or my intel report had uh, British cavalry somewhere in this vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I'm in the right area. Okay. Um, the center of their line was around Hougoumont. The right was somewhere around La Haye-Saint, and over in here were just a few skirmishers to the right. Now, as a deployment, that made good sense. If they're expecting the Prussians to come in uh, on this side, on the east side of the map, they could afford to put their weaker forces to the left and be stronger on the right. And if they were anticipating me attacking their right, our left, that also makes sense. The forces that I was told that we saw over here on the right were Dutch, and the forces that we saw on their right, our left, were British.
Mm-hmm.
At least that was the intel. So the original plan would have had us going to the left. Oh, by the way, our starting zone, our deployment zone, was kind of something like that.
Right.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Actually, I think it extended all the way out to here too. But anyway, um, so we were kind of starting in this circle-like area around here. So the original plan would have been to strike at the left with a considerable amount of force, and that would hopefully have pushed. The first objective would have been this Braine-l'Alleud, and hopefully we would have pushed the British in this direction, and then at some point here made a pinning attack along here.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, guarding our right flank with the guard, the reserves. So that was the original idea. Now, if we had done that, I have no idea what ultimately would have happened, because there was a British force coming from the northwest, but it wasn't nearly as strong as what I was sending to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And we might well have rolled up the British on the left hand side, but what you would have ended up with is probably an end line somewhere like this. And at the end of the day, we would have this field, and we'd have the way open basically to the left if we wanted it. But we would probably not have destroyed the British force. They could have fallen back along this line, and then they would have been reinforced by the Prussians, and we would have ended up with an end state where everybody says, yeah, it was a minor French win,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Well,
or at worst, it was a minor French defeat because we didn't get to that stage. So that was the safe plan. There was not going to be a decisive result. Okay. And the other plan was the one that we executed yesterday.
mhm.
It's
Well,
just erase all of
while
them.
you clean everything up, I'm going to say that had you attacked on the left, which was something I expected would happen,
Mhm.
the British right flank, the French left,
Mhm.
was kind of wide open for you to envelop and just do exactly what you had planned. Yes, there were reinforcements coming, but perhaps if you had sent the guard to the left or more resources to the left, I think you could have screened those British forces and you could have defeated them in detail because they were coming from three different directions. And, one was coming from the west, and that could have easily been destroyed. And then the other two would have been probably easy to at least push, if not destroy, if you had
I
committed enough troops to that left flank. But you didn't do that, of course, and
Nope.
now you're going to tell us the reason why.
The reason why was essentially the result that I just gave you. My expectation for that plan would have been probably the likely result would have been a minor French victory.
Mm-hmm.
And the other plan, the one that we did try to execute, was much riskier, but it was going to result in a decisive win one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was very much an all in kind of idea. And I presented both of these plans to my corps and wing commanders, and I favored the more decisive result one, and they agreed. Uh, I think we all wanted to, we wanted to go all in. We wanted to let's see if we can get a win that at the end of it, there's no doubt. There's no
Mm-hmm.
doubt who won this battle. So that would be more interesting. It'd be more fun. It'd be a better show. And I wanted to, one of the highest priorities for me, both in planning and in execution in this, was I wanted to get all of my guys involved. I wanted everybody to have to get into the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want at the end anybody saying, "Well, all I did was sit on my butt the entire game." You know, there wasn't going to be any marching simulators. There wasn't going to be any, well, we didn't do anything. Everybody was going to get into the fight.
Right.
So,
So where
yeah,
did you sit for the entire battle?
I sat. Let's see. Let
I
me
just
find
want
it.
to point that out because you mentioned, this is one of the great
Mhm.
criticisms that historians have about you is they say that you sat at the same spot for the entire battle. You never went to the front. You just sat there eating pork sandwiches and drinking vino, saying, "Forget about it."
Forget about it.
Inside joke, which folks will get if they watch the live stream.
Here it
But
is.
anyway, go ahead.
I was right here, La Maison d'Oie, and
Let me see. Here it is.
yeah, I reject that criticism entirely.
Mm-hmm.
The commander of an army shouldn't be, and for me, in my opinion, the commander of the army shouldn't be running around all over the field. He needs
Mm-hmm.
to be found, and he needs to be near headquarters so that as information is going in and out, it's getting to him as quickly as possible in that sense.
Yeah, see, this
Um,
is another case of the historians getting your story wrong. Continue,
yes.
please. Continue and provide the answer in English.
Yeah, okay.
AI, you got to tell it everything.
Um, so instead, our plan was to go to the right, as you know, and we placed. Let's see. We placed. First corps was like somewhere in here. Fourth corps was right behind them,
Mm-hmm.
and the second cavalry was over here. And then now this was when we talk about why this didn't work, why it didn't come off. The biggest, I would say, the biggest factor was where the Prussians came in.
Mm-hmm.
The choice of where the Prussians decided to enter the field was brilliant. It was an inspired choice, and it was right where I didn't want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and in the plan, it was a possibility that I considered, and it's the reason that I considered this to be a high risk. If they came in where I was hoping they would, where I thought the better odds of them coming in were, uh, it changes this. It almost certainly changes the outcome of this. Um, but because of where they did come in, they came in right. I mean, if I were going to pick a spot that I did not want them to be, that was it, and
Mm-hmm.
that was exactly where they came in. Um, the only way I could mitigate that in the planning was the strength of the force that I was sending, and hopefully the speed of the movement would put me in a position to where I would still have enough force to hold them off. Also, I completely misjudged the size of the Prussian force.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought they would have a little less than they actually had. Second Corps, under Great Gold over here, did an incredible job. I mean, I don't think I could have asked for anything better. He made the Prussians think he was much bigger than he was,
Mm-hmm.
and he held the force that was fighting with him off really all day. I mean, that's pretty amazing considering he was out there with a depleted corps pretty
Yeah.
much all by himself the
Mm-hmm.
entire day.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't have asked for a better job out of him. He did exactly what I wanted. But of course, the Prussians ended up coming out here somewhere, and that was exactly where I did not need them to be.
Yeah.
I anticipated them to come somewhere further south, probably
Mm-hmm.
closer to where the historical entrance was,
Mm-hmm.
and I was ready for that. I had a cavalry corps down here. I had the guard, and I had like 17 batteries of reserve army artillery waiting for them.
Mm-hmm. See, this is another one of the things that the historians have got wrong over the past 2 centuries. They've criticized your commander on the right, Great Gold. They've criticized him for defending so far south. And, oh, why didn't he go north? Why didn't he go north? But the plan was, and the expectation was, that the
Mm-hmm.
Prussians were going to enter from the south. In fact, at one point, the primary sources suggest that the Prussians suspected that you were in the south and they were going to come south down here in this direction and then in this way. Now, I don't know if
Wish they
that's really
had.
true or not, but there is a school of thought among historians that this may have been the plan. And if that had been the case, then you would have judged them perfectly. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's really unfair the way they nitpick at Great Gold. Of course, we don't have him generated on AI.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to let you finish, and then we have a little
Okay.
surprise for everyone once you're
Okay.
done with your little recap here. So please continue.
Sure. I think. Well, as I said, I think he did a fantastic job, and he did what I would have wanted him to do. It turned out to not be where it needed to be, but
Mm-hmm.
we couldn't have known that. and so yeah, he did what was expected of him.
Hmm.
This attack. Oh, I should say uh, we had forces
Yeah,
here.
you did. Yeah.
That was Third Corps, and Third Corps was a depleted corps also, which is why it wasn't in the main assault.
But you
So
did reinforce them. You sent 6 batteries of artillery from the guard, no less.
mhm. Actually, my wing commander Grushi did that. I didn't.
Yeah.
Um, and this is an important, I think, an important point. I made the plan. I gave the objectives, the timing, and the intent, but I left the execution to very capable people,
Hmm.
and what they did with it, I cannot fault them for. The fault here totally lies with me. It was in the overall plan itself. But
Woke AI
they
just
executed it.
parroting what the historians have said. Man, I tell you, this AI is
They
broken. The historians are wrong. That's the point.
they
Man.
they executed what I asked them to do, as well as anybody could, and they almost pulled it off. The idea here was First Corps was striking here, and their zone, the core zone, was between La Haye and Papelot, and they were intended to go here and swing left. And when they did the swing, their core zone would be um, again La Haye and Mont Saint Jean. I'm sorry. Second Cavalry was to go through here, sweep this plain, which was one of my safeguards against Prussian arrival. I
Hmm.
thought the Prussians would arrive a lot sooner than they did.
Right.
Just given the nature of things, I thought that you know that the Prussians would end up being closer, or even some of them might even be on the map to start.
Hmm.
So if there were the possibility of them coming in there up there, which I considered lower odds, this sweep by the cavalry would at least let us know they were there and block them. If they didn't run into the Prussians there, they were intended to go this way. And Fourth Corps would be following the vacated area of First Corps and Second Cav, and they would go this way. And then their core zone would be their left would be at Mont Saint Jean, and their right would be up here at whatever the name of that town is.
All right, I've got a couple questions. Please provide responses in English, AI. The first question for you is, once you realized the Prussians were late, why
Mhm.
didn't you send your cavalry, the cavalry that you planned to send up to block Prussian arrival?
Mhm.
What was that? What was the designation for that one? I forget. There's so many units.
Which one are you talking about?
This
The
one
one in
here.
the north or the one in the south?
This one here.
That's Second Cavalry.
All right, Second Cavalry. Of course, you guys are going to have to fact check this. Sometimes the AI gets these things spectacularly wrong. But why didn't you send the Second Cavalry to Great Gold much sooner? This is one of the things that historians fault you for, is you had the cavalry sitting here while Great Gold was doing his best to hold the Prussians at bay. He could have made use of that cavalry.
Great Gold was never going to get that cavalry. It was never intended to go there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was not part of the plan. If there was nothing up here when they made their move, they would make their swing. If if the Prussians were up here, then they were to block
Mm-hmm.
as the Prussians come in. Uh, Hopefully, the Prussians would come in somewhat uh, staggered,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be able to damage those front groups as they came in.
Mm-hmm.
And my wing commander James was given the flexibility. He could have, because Fourth Corps was coming up through here, he could have detached part of Fourth Corps to support them if
Which
these
I
guys
think
were
he
here.
may have done. I think he sent a portion of the 13th Division to the right. I
Yes.
could be wrong about that, but I think he did that.
He
And
did.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other aspect of it was this cavalry, which is first cav.
Mm-hmm.
Here was this was an error, but I'm not going to fault the guy, but this was an error.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, he ended up on the Vavra map, and that was never part of the plan. But I didn't know that he went there.
Mm.
I was
Mm.
never given that information. So when we spotted the Prussians, and that's when I think timing wise, and I can't be 100% sure, but I think timing wise, it was about the time that this cavalry force is heading this direction, starting to head this direction. But as we get the first reports of the first Prussian soldiers arriving out here, and they were around, at that point, they were around here and maybe here.
Yeah.
Okay. As that occurred, I sent an order for this cavalry force to head up here.
Mm-hmm. And of course, they weren't there to do that.
They weren't there to do that, and I didn't know they weren't there to do that. And I don't. When they finally got that message, it was probably like 2 hours too late.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
they were completely on a different map.
And yet,
But
historians blame you for this. It's insane, man. How wrong they
it
get.
happens.
All right.
It
Should have
happens.
ridden
I mean,
around more. You
if
should
they
have
had,
ridden around more.
yeah, you
Well,
should have. Maybe
I
so.
I have another question now, just to keep it
Mhm,
rolling here.
mhm.
Lancer asks on the YouTube question from the gallery: once you knew the Prussians were approaching from further north than expected, why didn't you commit the guard then, rather than continue to hold them in reserve? It's one of the
At
questions historians ask. So let's have your answer.
at the same time that and at this point, these guys start. These guys should have been going north, but I don't know they are. I don't know they're not. Which would have been nice because they would have probably been in this area where I think it was 14th Division got broken and the Prussians came through. They would probably have been in that vicinity at right at the same time, which could have changed that outcome. The guard, on the other hand, now at this point, all I have is a report that says we see some Prussians up here.
Mm.
All right, that doesn't tell me where the main body of the Prussians are. For all I know, they're still coming from this direction.
Right, those could have been
And
scouts. Yeah.
and my messages from the Vavra field were long delayed because this is way far away.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I'm getting anything from Second Corps to tell me what's going on in this fight, it's it's a very long delay. At that point, though, as soon as I realized, or I didn't even realize yet whether this was still possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I have nothing down here. Okay, I have nothing down here except for the guard and its artillery. But before I even have the information that this is probably the main group of Prussians that are coming, I did already order the guard. But instead of sending them up here, I sent them here.
Okay.
And the reasoning for that was at this point, First Corps is done.
Mm-hmm.
They've got
They're
no
spent.
fight left in them. Yeah.
And then
That
Fourth
was-
Corps is done too.
Well, Fourth Corps should be mostly fresh because they actually got delayed going through here for reasons I'm not clear on. I don't know what happened, but for whatever reason, they got delayed in their movement, and so by the time they got up here, they're still pretty fresh.
Okay,
But
so
first-
I'm looking at my notes here, and according to my notes from the historians, when you received word that not all of Fourth Corps had advanced on Q, you allegedly replied to the messenger, Forget about it.
Yes, exactly, man.
Is
Forget about
that
it.
true, or have historians got that wrong?
They may have misunderstood me because I had a mouthful of pork sandwich at the time,
Oh, all right.
but at this point, with first core spent and pretty much not going to be combat effective. Um, that was not an unforeseen circumstance, obviously, because they were the pointy end of the spear. They were the lead element, and they were going to have the roughest fight. They had to make the initial breakthrough. So Fourth Corps would be coming up behind them, and hopefully, be able to take over the momentum of the attack towards this direction, which was the eventual goal. At the same time, I ordered Third Corps to make a pinning attack along here, hoping that the cavalry, at this point, I'm hoping the cavalry can hold off the Prussian elements long enough for Fourth Corps to make its lunge towards Braine-l'Alleud, and I'm sending the Guard to strike this center area. Now, they went for Hougoumont. I can't blame him for that, because that is actually what I told him. I said, go to Hougoumont, attack the center. Now, he could have, and in fact, as I understand it from the debrief, the Guard cavalry actually broke a British division in here somewhere.
Yeah, they sure did.
And we're going through, but they're now spent, and they have no infantry support. He could have bypassed Hougoumont completely, just left it, and gone right up behind the cavalry, which is probably what I would have done if I was in that situation, but I can't fault him for it, because I told him, go to Hougoumont. He did what I asked him to do, and I wasn't at that point of attack, so, if I was doing... If I was the tactical commander there, I might have done it a little differently, but I don't know. I might have done the same thing he did. I don't know.
Yeah, well, Zindos Grouchy, who was the mastermind behind this attack, at least according to the historians, was in fact there. In fact, you may know this, although your database doesn't go to anything, I think, after, 2019 or something. But if you query your database, you'll probably find that the charge of the three generals, who Grouchy and his Guard commanders literally led these charges. And of course, it's been the highlight of many movies, the charge of the Guard. It is always a beautiful, epic scene in every movie where you see the Guard going forward, and they're perfectly arrayed in their pristine uniforms, and the bayonets are glittering, and the music is playing, and they go forward, and they actually break that British line. They break that British division, and they start running. And then, of course, the Prussians arrive, and it all just kind of collapses.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I mean, when I sent these guys off from the south, I had absolutely nothing defending down here. So that was kind of anxiety for Carter and I, as we're sitting in headquarters and thinking, okay, well, there's nothing between us and that other map. If they do come that way, we're hosed. But yeah, at that point, I had committed everything, which was good, because, as I say, I wanted to make sure everybody got into the fight. Yeah. But I was hopeful that 2 corps of cavalry with maybe a division and support from 4th Corps could hold off the Prussians long enough for this to finish the British.
Yeah.
But it didn't work. It didn't work. I can't blame, as I say, I can't blame my subordinate commanders. They did everything they could possibly have done. I mean, they may have made an error or two here or there, but quite honestly, that is always the case. And they tried with all their heart to execute the idea of the plan, and I can't fault them for that. It was the plan itself that was faulty, only in the sense that and I mean, the plan was not, it wasn't a bad plan,
It was a great
except
plan.
except that the
Woke AI again, folks.
but it was based on an odds calculation that turned out to
Mm-hmm.
be, the lower odds were the correct ones,
Mm-hmm.
and the Prussians came in at exactly the right time and at exactly the right place with enough strength to to destroy it. So yeah, I mean, hats off to the Prussian commander, because they did exactly what I did not want them to do, and hats off to the British commanders who held on against a really powerful attack uh, long enough. I mean, just long enough. I mean, I think the British force, and I don't know what the final results on that were, but I think the British force was pretty wrecked by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But they were able to hold out long enough to give the Prussians time to get there and do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
So I can't fault them. I think it was a great game, and I really had a good time playing it. And to be honest, I think we put on a good show. I hope it was fun for everybody that got to play. And I
Well,
tried to make sure that my guys got
Yeah.
as involved as they could through the game. So
as Peter Wellington remarked after the battle, there was enough glory and fun for all. So in my book, The Dogs of Waterloo, I have a couple paragraphs about the actual battle. And one of the things that I mention in those few paragraphs about the battle, then I talk about all the dogs. But one of the paragraphs, and it's about a 400-page book available from Dog Books publisher, is how the Fourth Corps in particular went in piecemeal. They had their first division go, and then the other two divisions behind them were greatly delayed. Now, according to Ney, James Ney, who was commanding the Fourth Corps,
he was commanding the right wing.
the right wing. That's correct. And he had I can't remember the name of the subordinate then, but he ordered his subordinate, the commander of the Fourth Corps, to advance, and that meant advance all at once. And he did give that order. Unfortunately, I think the dispatch writers, something happened to the dispatches that caused them to be delayed. I think there is some snippet about the dispatch writer being very hungry and smelling some delicious pork sandwich and may have stopped in somewhere. But for whatever reason, I don't believe it is the fault of the Corps commander or of James Ney. Or, of course, not Achilles-Napoleon. At the end of the day, I think had that order been obeyed, had it been delivered in a timely fashion, I think the results would have been much more to your expectation, because the attack would have maintained its momentum, whereas there was a brief pause in the attack as the reserves, or the other two divisions of the Fourth Corps came up, I should say. And I think that was really, really expensive. But I told everybody that I have a surprise. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to,
Let me just say
Go ahead.
that I mean, that is ultimately, that's the friction. That's the friction
Yeah.
of war. So it's one of those things you can't plan for, but will always happen.
Yeah, I mean, who plans for a pork sandwich in the middle of battle, right? I don't know
Anyway, I'm
anybody
sorry.
who does that.
Continue.
Maybe there's a pork patty MRE, but
There is a pork patty MRE. It's the worst MRE there is.
yeah,
I
but if
hate
you're
them.
hungry, right?
I still have nightmares about the pork patty MRE.
All right, real
Maybe
quick.
somebody planned for strawberries.
There was that
Yes.
too. There was that too. Just real quick, we do have a Grand Waterloo merch in the IKS store with free shipping to the United States. So be sure to get your merch. So there you have it. Now, I told you I have a surprise for you. And yes, I used the AI to generate the Prussian commander. Now, I've got to say, and we're going to talk to the AI-generated Prussian commander in a moment. I have to say I am extremely proud of the Prussian commander. In fact, he is my secret favorite player of the event. Why? Why? Why on earth? I think that the Prussians were really messed up at the beginning of the battle in a number of ways. I'll let them speak for themselves, but in my opinion, my read as a professional historian on dogs is that the Prussians had some command issues. They command and control problems. They had to switch out some commanders at the last minute. And they believed incorrectly, but based on their intel, that they were facing a force that was much larger than they actually were. They had a defensive mindset as a result. They were expecting to block a major French attack, not reinforce the British or attack themselves. And it took them about half of the battle to kind of suss out the situation and figure out what was really going on. They even sent a cavalry corps to the southeast to find you. And of course, they didn't find the French because you weren't there. When they did figure it out, however, they got their act together quickly and effectively. They counterattacked the smaller French force and began to overwhelm and destroy them while sending the reinforcements, which made a timely arrival. If I had to choose a victor of the Battle of Grand Waterloo as an individual player, it would absolutely be Cookie Blucher. Now, we're going to ask the AI to provide his brief account of the battle and what he thinks went wrong and what went right. Cookie AI Blucher, can you please tell us your account quickly of the battle and provide the answer in German?
Yes, I could do it in German, but then nobody would understand it.
Oh, that's right. Yes, you're right. Go ahead and do it in English. I'm sorry.
All right.
AI is smarter than I am sometimes.
Basically, what you said in regards to the commanders was correct. We had some major trouble with that. And also with the initial intelligence part in us assessing that the enemy force was far larger than it was. The part where you stated that we weren't able to take our initial positions that we intended was not quite correct, because we did only intend to go up to here and here. We did not initially intend to go to the large area down south, because it was mostly intended as a defensive line, until we could figure out what the French were actually up to. And our second call from the beginning was something of a flexible choice, because we sent it along the north, both north and south of the major river in the area, because as we discovered at a certain point, there aren't any bridges up until you get to the Aube in the north, and we weren't sure if the fords were actually crossable. So we had to reroute some of the brigades in the last minute south of the river to make sure that not everything had to go over one bridge in the end, and to also ensure that the brigades could be called down if we needed to. And at a certain point, and basically the idea was, when the units get to the Aube, by that time we would have figured out whether the troops would have to fight the French forces, which we suspected to be in this general area, because we suspected Achilles or Napoleon would put some sort of blocking force in there, or if they could run straight into the next straight to Mont Saint-Jean, or would have to come down to help out the main force in case we were the main target, which we gave about even odds for. So it was partially due to Marshal Riel blocking us in the further in the south, and part of the initial plan already being that we would be coming from the north. So there were plans to maybe split off here and go further south to try flanking, but that would be up to the local conditions. And roughly at noon or shortly after that, we discovered that this entire part here was probably weaker than we expected, and I gave orders for a general advance on all fronts against the enemy, or no, not yet, but I basically ordered the troops at Wavre, the 2 brigades of 3rd Corps that were there to be pulled, and for 1st Corps to be cut loose if they went north of Wavre at that point. That part went horribly wrong in regards to the cavalry, because they did not get that message through the Corps command, 3rd Corps commander who was here, and well, I expected the cavalry commander to maybe just go herring off westwards in search of the enemy, as Prussian hussars want to do. They actually went back to Wavre, and which I only found out an hour later, and I was like, dread. I got the one cavalry commander who decides not to follow up his temper.
Well, all right.
It did.
Go ahead.
It did work out in the end, because they came in here at the correct moment to counter the 4th light cavalry that the French sent up here and to shatter it. So your cavalry, light cavalry, did actually make a major difference there, because otherwise the cavalry that I sent down here would have run all the way down to Genappe and probably fallen into Urea at the most incorrect time.
Continue
Also,
generating. Continue generating.
Okay. Basically, at roughly shortly before, after 1 p.m. in the afternoon, I decided that it was time for the major push along the entire along our entire line towards the southwest with all 3 corps, which did work out with 2nd Corps quite fast. As 1st and 3rd Corps did need some more time to actually form up, but thanks to the leadership of the von Thiemann and von Zieten, they did manage a pretty strong attack in with several lines in depth, which steamrolled the French defenses and would have probably kept going up until they reached the French headquarters, because the French, by the time of 3 p.m., were all but broken and hardly any forces left in that area, and 2nd Corps was able to press its advantage into the French rear after we had some initial fighting in this area with our 2nd Corps CAV, which I personally led against the French 13th Cavalry Division. And I believe we would have kept going thanks to the still more or less completely fresh not second, but 3rd and 1st Corps that were moving up, also coordinated thanks to the great coordination of Gneisenau. And yeah, that's how it went.
Thank you.
President Barton, would you like to comment on this?
You're welcome.
Well, there we go. That's the AI for you. It's kind of weird. All right, now I have another treat for everyone. As you know, I have been at odds with a particular historian who apparently knows more about the Prussian strategy and what the Prussians did than I do. And it's probably true, but he doesn't know anything about all the dogs. But I have Jan Let's Play History, the author of a book on the Battle of Grand Waterloo, here. And I'm going to ask him to share his assessment based on his research. He probably used AI to write it, for all I know. Of the battle. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Historian Jan Let's Play History, author of the book of the Battle of Grand Waterloo. What do you have to say about all this?
Yeah, right. My book focuses on a character study of Gneisenau's activities around Wavre. Yeah, we were the Prussian side was pretty fooled by the French movements to the south, Corbet and Ottigny. And then later on, they received reports of 2 large columns moving through Chapelle-Saint-Lambert. Maybe I can draw that down. And let's see, here we go. So we had reports of columns moving here and here. And at that point in time, the Prussian army headquarters had no idea about the movements of Second Corps. The last report they received, they were somewhere here. And then no reports arrived whether these forts were crossable or not, or whether they had all to go via the bridge. And then out of a sudden, they received a message of the Second Corps cavalry stating that they were basically in Orin with no enemies whatsoever in the area. And basically the overall plan just unfolded because of that. So we did fear the enemy to be in this area, and to, rather than focus against Mont-Saint-Jean and Waterloo, to focus on the Prussian army and drive a massive force basically along this line here and block us off and destroy the Prussian army, because the Prussian army, of course, is disrupted from the Battle of Ligny, and they are still trying to reorganize and all that stuff. So why not just focus down on them and keep the Allies busy, especially as we knew that the British did a pretty weird deployment with 2 corps far to the west, and we were very concerned about that. And we did let Wellesley know, but apparently he had no interest in answering our questions in that regard whatsoever. So yeah, when the battle started and the starting of our movements was delayed by 3 hours. So we had given orders to march out at 6 in the morning, but we only managed to start marching at 9. We were pretty concerned because there was still that, and especially when the reports came in of 2 columns moving into that gap, we thought, well, okay, now the worst case happens, and the French are focusing down on the Prussian army. Didn't happen. And then basically everything else just developed as Blücher had basically planned, and we arrived just in time.
Hey, Jan, did you guys ever figure out who those 2 columns were?
No. Maybe that were cavalry elements or something. I don't know. No clue.
Phantom columns. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was great, Gold. He was doing such a great job of deception out there.
Apparently.
Well, there we have it.
Concerning taking into account that we had very little time preparing our team, right? Remember back at Grand Waterloo 2 years ago, the Union Army basically spent 2 months drilling the team, having tactical and operational discussions and all that, and then sort of picking the right commanders for the right job. And we basically had, let's say, 2 days. Of course, we had a week or so, but because of time zones and so on, we didn't really have the chance to meet with the whole team and discuss everything. So basically, the implementation of the plan was discussed within 2 days, you can say. And based on that, I'm quite astonished how well the players did, how much they did communicate, how much they actually used reserves, secondary lines, and so on. Well, in part it was due to the terrain and the limited space they had, but they seemed to also focus on doing that. So I'm quite proud about that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if I had the chance to talk to Wellesley, I'm still not sure what this deployment was all about, and if that really was the right decision to send the Allied Second Corps down to the southeast there.
Well, in the notes, it's in my book. I talk about how Wellesley got a dog that he named Lizzie just a few days prior to the battle, and how that was quite a distraction for him. Petting her, feeding her treats, taking naps with her, having tea with her. Normal behavior, but it was a distraction, All right. I've used AI to generate another French commander. I'm going to see if it will work here. and if the French commander can tell us about his experience. Let's see if it works. Go ahead.
Currently loading.
Okay.
Can I connect to the flex stable?
Yes, you can. Yeah, it's IKS whatever battle, whatever, I don't know, just whatever name I always use. And you should be able to comb through the database for my password. It's the same for my financial information, but it's IKS all lowercase. So you should know that, of course, being an
Your
AI.
finances are not looking good.
Yeah, well, no, they're not. That's why I'm trying to sell mugs. It's crazy, man. Mug sales have literally been zero for like the past 10 months now. And I don't know why people won't buy them, but we're getting hungry over here in the Neo residence. But go ahead.
That reminds me, I need to get some more.
There you go. There you go. Sweetheart, we're going to go ahead and get the big box of ramen. All right, go ahead. All right, here's Great Gold. Here we go. We're going to promote him. All right. Might have to have a color. Don't choose
I
gray.
cannot choose a color.
Okay, I think the magic thing is... no, it's up here, isn't it? It's under options. And it's hands, and it's...
Now you can. I switch to observer.
Yeah, isn't there a command I can type in, like, using the...
No, you need to create more hands on the table.
There's no...
Right, but there's an option for that, isn't there?
I've got it already. Jan gave me his color.
All right. Well, see, this is why AI is going to rule the world, man. They know things that humans... They do things so quick. But go ahead. Provide your answer in English.
Amongst each other... Of course. I, or at least the person I am bid to imitate by the computer, was in command of French 2nd Corps, and the objective given was to basically keep as much of the Prussian army at Wavre from joining up with the British at Waterloo as possible. Our deployment zone for the beginning of the battle was something along these lines, and we were told we had skirmished with the Prussians at about the same area as well. We knew from the start that the Prussians outnumbered us about 10-1, because the briefing said that there was about 100,000 Prussians, and our 2nd Corps simply numbered around 10,000, maybe 15,000 men. So we never for a second imagined that we would be winning anything else than time. Our corps was just set to be a speed bump. As for the plan, I decided to go with... it was based upon what I think Blücher should do. If I was Blücher, which of course I wasn't, I would have done much the same as the Prussians had done historically, as to leave a screen at Wavre or along the river here, and simply take most of his forces west to Waterloo and reinforce the beleaguered British. So this is the idea around which I designed my own plan. And this plan saw the concentration of my entire corps on this very, very small section of the deployment zone of Moustier and Ottignies. And our aim was to either block the route to the historical deployment of the Prussians to Waterloo, which was around here, I believe. And if the Prussians were already ahead of us on the road, like something like this, then to intercept their column and force them into an engagement.
Right.
That was basically the plan.
Right. And the historians criticize you for not doing that, but why didn't that happen?
Oh, why didn't I intercept all 100,000 Prussians with 50,000?
Right,
That's the question.
exactly.
With your 10,000 men.
Exactly. Yet the historians just carry on about this. See, exactly. Thank you.
I'm sorry. You
for
need to
vindicating me.
You need to rename yourself Xenophon or something.
Right? I know. I know.
I apologize to the historians. We only got like 2 Prussian corps out of the 30. I believe there was 1 corps around Wavre, holding Wavre, and then 1 corps marching along this road.
Yeah.
The 1 corps that we didn't manage to intercept was the one going in from the north.
Yeah.
Also, another reason for the plan, which I already talked about to you on the stream, was that going this way would not only intercept the Prussians marching west, but it would also render the Prussian screen at Wavre at least temporarily useless. So that was how we could maximize the number of Prussian units wasted. As for the northern column, I was completely aware of the potentiality of the Prussians reinforcing through there, and I had intended to cut it with something. It was just that we simply did not have the steam, did not have enough men to actually do that. I had sent forces, which Gneiss now has previously mentioned that they spotted some sort of column in this general vicinity. Well, the column, that infamous column, was actually just 3 chasseurs that I had sent up there on 2 different occasions, which were screening on Doudremont.
Wow.
The only thing they were there for is to notify us of an incoming Prussian column, and maybe we could attack it from Chapelle Saint-Lambert or something like that. That's about all the reserves we could muster for holding off or delaying that 3rd Prussian column.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as for the exact details of what we did, there are 2 parallel roads leading out of Moustier and Letigny, so I choose to go along those to maximize our speed and to reach our positions as quickly as possible. And I chose to, well, since I assumed that the Prussians would be coming a bit closer to the Saint Robert Chapel here, which would end up being the contention of much fighting, I sent a column up, originally towards the direction of Le Melette to act as a threat to the Prussian left and force them to deploy on the heights and to block or slow, at least, the incoming men from Wavre, which will eventually realize that, of course, there's nothing actually facing them. So this was the thought behind Le Melette. We later found out that the bridge at Le Melette was burned, so we were forced to take more alternative routes to the heights, but the effect was the same.
Mm-hmm.
As for the lines, the ideal lines we wanted to have, and which we never achieved during the battle, we wanted to have control of the woods, the little Saint Robert Chapel gap, and to hold on to the woods/heights just to the southwest of Le Melette. This was the imagined line we wanted to do. But we encountered the Prussians way too early to be able to deploy into such positions. I believe I found them at Neuve-Châtel. Yes, Neuve Cabaret. Sorry. Yeah, I found them there, and then they pushed in our weak chasseur screen too much for us to be able to see Saint Robert. We had deployed most of our guns into a grand battery around Saint Robert. This is the battery that the Prussian cavalry eventually ended up charging and breaking upon, or at least getting severely disorganized upon. I don't really know how it happened. So we never really got to fill the gap. Our line was pretty thin throughout the entire thing. We couldn't hold on to more, so yeah, we just didn't have the men to really hold off this northern portion. Eventually, of course, the Prussians deployed, and their overbearing numbers came down on us. We also received some reinforcements from the southwest, which initially scared me a lot. Yeah, they scared me a lot because my umpire told me that we see horsemen in dark colors coming from the south. So we thought they were Prussians for a second, and we started panicking. But soon it was found out that they were actually French. And those horsemen came in very handy once we were forced to abandon our initial positions due to just the overwhelming Prussian attack from all directions. And we set up our final line near Le Quatre-Furiers to try and continuously, of course, block the Prussian road to Saint-Ouen. And here this is where the battle ended, with our line buckling here as well. So yeah.
All right.
That was
Well, I do think you're one of the unsung heroes. I think the historians have given you a bad rap. But speaking of bad raps, okay, Peter Wellington gets a lot of criticism because of his initial deployment, and at the end of the day, his force was badly mauled because they really withstood the brunt of a much larger and very powerful French force. A lot of people blame Wellington because, like I said earlier in my book, The Dogs of Grand Waterloo, he had a dog and the dog was distracting him. I can't blame the guy though. I would do the same, you know. But I have used AI to generate this final historical character for our podcast today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Wellington to provide his assessment of what happened and why. And he should be able to draw everything on the map. And Peter Wellington, please provide your response in English.
Yeah, sure. So, to quote myself from 200 years ago, this was a poor plan, poorly executed by my subordinates that led to success. That's essentially my honest interpretation of the battle. The fact that I was so spread out was more to do with the previous day's reports coming in. We had an understanding that there was a much larger force in the Hal sector, a larger French cavalry force in the Hal sector. So I'll use a little rouge here to highlight my musings here. So, okay, yeah. So, where is Hal? Up this way. So anyway, we felt there was a larger French force in and around Jeanette, so we felt we had to have something over there. So we had Lord Somerset over there, and we had a brigade set up there, and that was partly why the second corps, which was based around here, was there, because if that was a large cavalry force followed up by infantry, then we would have nothing to oppose it, whereas the Second Corps could perhaps intercede on that and also intercede on the central area as well. Where the reserves were, it was just an open space basically, where I felt like there was enough roads to react to, either coming down Hal or coming to Waterloo, or coming into the Wavre sector. I knew it was a reasonable distance away. I expected we could get bodies into either sector in about an hour, between an hour and a half and 2 hours from our location of the reserves. Obviously, as it panned out, the French were very close here. We knew there was 5 divisions plus around this kind of sector here, but we were unsure whether that was just 5 or 6 divisions that perhaps First Corps that was based around here could hold up for long enough. But obviously, it was much more than that was actually there. So, again, a poor plan, poorly executed, but it actually worked out well. So. And I don't know what happened. Did the actually? No, this is the real battle, isn't it? We're just refighting the actual. We're talking about the historical battle. My AI company is a little bit more blasé about things, but
I understand. I understand.
So that would be my understanding of it. The reason why we were so spread out, and I'll just put is because the reports we were getting were not so convincing of the French attack coming from one place or another. We also knew that the French were at Genappe as well, somewhere around here. So yeah, it was literally that. We didn't really know exactly where they were coming from, but I had confidence in Eli and First Corps to ascertain the situation there, and to draw us in if necessary, which we actually did very quickly once we fully ascertained that was where the full strength was, but as quick as we could. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask the most important question of the podcast, which is, tell us about Peter Wellington's dog, Lizzie.
Well, she did take an active part in the actual battle. She was actually a bit of a dispatch runner as well. She's very brave. A few doggy biscuits for it each time. So yeah, I think she got grazed by a musket ball, but I'm sure it'll be in some water oil painting somewhere.
Oh yeah, it is. And if not, we'll use AI to generate it. All right, it's about time to wrap up. We have gone way over time. This may be the longest Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel podcast we've run. But again, thanks to the modern convenience of AI, we can do things that we just couldn't do just even months ago. Real quick, though, I would like to invite questions from the audience. From the audience, since we have all the principal commanders here, although in AI form, what are your questions for them? What are your questions? And just hit invite to speak down there, and we'll bring you up for a moment to ask your question. Let's see who clicks that button there. Who's got the courage to ask a question? I mean, what do you want to know? You know, the humans in the audience, because yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened, and there were a lot of moving parts, and not everything went perfectly, and the historians have got a lot of stuff wrong. What do you want to know?
You know, Peter, is really interesting. One little kind of irony here is the only reason that there was a cavalry division on the Hall map at all was Blazer didn't require it. He didn't force me to put it there, but he said the game will be better if you at least put a cavalry division on that map, because originally it wasn't going to be there. I didn't have anything on that map at all, and so I said, okay, well, yeah, I want the game to be better, so I detached a cavalry division to put on there. Otherwise, there would have been nothing on that map at all.
Yeah, and we was also told it was a large cavalry force as well, which, just unnerved us. I don't know if this is the first time that two AIs have had a conversation before.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy, man, because once
We're
you guys
breaking new
network,
ground.
I mean, it's over for humanity.
Yeah, and also when I saw that you put right side nay or whatever it was, I knew it was the other way round. I just knew.
Well, to be honest, that was actually where they were going to be. It wasn't until the night before when I decided on the risky plan that I switched them. So I flipped them, and I just told them, you know what, leave your profile name the way it is, because they're going to probably anticipate that Nay will be leading the attack, and they may think it'll come on the left-hand side. So I told them just leave it.
I've got a slight analogy. I was in goal for my football team, and the ball was crossed over, and I was on the front post, and I was just not quick enough to get to the other post. So I just stayed on the front post, and then the guy took a header back across goal, and it hit me in the face and went for a corner. I think that's kind of what happened here in this battle as well.
Hey,
Oh boy!
I got a question for Wellington.
You tell the AI to respond in English, and boy, does it. All right, we've got a question here. Let's hear the question. We actually also have one on the YouTube, which I'll ask. But go ahead.
Wellington, what was your I don't know how much information you had, but what was your thought when because you and this reserve corps arrived just as pretty much the entire situation in the first corps was going to shit. We had the Dutch were in the middle of a total retreat. The first division was getting pressed hard. The third and the first and third were retreating. We were probably a turn away from breaking. So I want to know what your thought was when you arrived in on that.
Yeah, I think it was Eli Gray's eternal optimism that emboldened me. That I was being told that Second Corps was doing great work on the western flank, and also that I arrived with the heavy cavalry as well, so that it kind of just seemed like I'm doing my thing of just arriving at the right time again. So just don't tempt fate. Just keep on arriving at the right time.
All right. A question from the humans on YouTube. Lancer asks, for each commander, so we're looking for 3 answers here. Let's see here. There it is. Using 2020 hindsight, in other words, querying the database and the historical literature that you have available to you, as well as your AI, if you could alter one small aspect of your plan, what would it have been and why? Let's start with Achilles-Napoleon.
Let's see. If I could alter just one thing, I would probably have
more
put
dogs.
The guard. Yeah, exactly. More dogs. I would have put the guard up closer to the Hougoumont area, and I would have launched them into the attack right after First Corps hit. And yeah, I think that would have been overwhelming at that point.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Cookie Blucher. What is one thing that you would change?
I would have probably changed the timing of my attack. I would have launched the general attack probably 2 or 3 hours earlier, which would have given most of my forces the time to actually get onto the Waterloo section and actually probably turn the entire French flank, even if they had taken out a British corps or even 1.5 British corps, I believe, with close to 90,000 Prussian soldiers, I would have still beaten them even in a straight-up fight, because no way they come out of the fight with the British without casualties.
All right, Peter Wellington, what is one of the things you would have changed?
I kind of want to say something silly, but I won't. I'll literally just say that in hindsight, indeed, the reserve and Second Corps would have been a lot closer to First Corps. Knowing what we know now, they would have been a lot closer.
All right. One more question here from a human who has come up to the stage. Go ahead.
All right, so we're having an interesting chat between the AIs and whatnot in the server, and the main question here is, the Prussians had multiple plans to deal with a French attack on us and also to help the British. But did the British have a plan to come help the Prussians if we were attacked?
That would be to Peter Wellington.
Yes, well, that's kind of why we had the Reserve Corps where it was, because we were not really too sure where the main strength of the French were. So if we ascertained that there was a much stronger element facing the Prussians, the Reserve Corps would have moved in that direction, essentially. Whether it got there in time, I guess it might have taken 3 hours or something like that to actually get there. But that was kind of the intention from the scouting report to have some kind of flexibility on where we could move to.
All right. Cookie Blucher, did you have any final comment?
I guess I had a question to the Napoleon AI.
Okay.
Regarding his assessment, why a push on the left would have been a lower risk, because I think the risk would have been lower, but the reward, but not by that much, because even if you push through the British lines and shatter part of them, you push them right into the direction of the Prussians, basically.
Yes. Yes.
And
Oh, what makes it lower risk is that if I don't have you coming in on my rear or my flank, so I could protect that line more effectively if I'm making the swing from the left. But it's also the reason why it was not going to achieve a decisive result for me. The best I could hope for by doing that way was a minor victory, and that's only if I could wreck the British and then kind of face off against the Prussians. Either way, once both your armies were on the field, you outnumber us almost 2-1. So, but I'm required to attack. So it's kind of it's asymmetric in that anyway. So the only chance I really have is I have to take out one of you before I face the other one, and I'm much further away from you if I'm on the left. So I have more time to try to take out the British before I have to face the Prussians. It was just a lower risk option, but the one that I did was clearly a much higher risk, and it was only going to work if you came in further south, which you didn't. So,
all right. Well, everybody, I'm going to take one last peek at the YouTube here. It looks good. All right. I want to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to thank the AI for doing an excellent job of recreating these 2-century-old commanders. I hope, of course, that you will buy my book, The Dogs of Grand Waterloo, which does have a few paragraphs about the battle as well. And I am very grateful for all of the work and the effort that went into planning and executing everything that we have done. And in particular, Blazer, very grateful to him because he really put a lot of work into this event in real life. And I don't think I could have done a better job. I certainly couldn't have, but that's why I picked Blazer to do it, because I knew he would do a great job, and he did. So my my hat is off to him, and to all of you who participated. Thank you to everyone who is here in the live stream, except for Jan, who is responsible for all the bad things. No, I'm kidding. No, thank you to to Jan as well. And I'm just very grateful to everyone. This was an amazing time. If you did not see the live stream, it is a 2-part live stream on YouTube. It says Grand Waterloo 2023. Make sure you start with part 1. I'll actually tell you to start with part 1 at the beginning of part 2. But, you know, just watch part 1, obviously, first. You'll hear my commentary as well as interviews with the players. And you'll see everything unfold as it happens. It's quite long, so it's one of those things that you'll just watch as time permits. But I think you'll find it enlightening and enjoyable. I think this really was, from a Kriegsspiel perspective, one of the best executed events in terms of player performance. The players did very, very well. Even the new players, they kind of absorbed the talent of those around them, and they also played quite well and effectively. This was not a typical IKS Open Saturday meme game where the players were doing the silly stuff that they did. Players were taking it very seriously. They were rotating in reserves. They were just doing everything that we want to see them do in a Kriegsspiel game, and it makes my heart swell with absolute pride. So I want to thank you all for your support for the IKS and turning up for the show and participating. And without any further ado, let us go forth and do more good Kriegsspiel. So having said that, thank you for being here, and we will see you